May I please have everyone's attention? Before the public hearing begins, we ask that everyone please silence your cell phones. The Fort Bend ISD Board of Trustees is holding a public hearing as required by law. Following the presentation, the board will ask if anyone present wants to make comments on the presentation. We also ask that members of the audience be respectful of others by remaining quiet so that everyone is able to hear the presentation and questions asked. Thank you.
Thank you, Officer. The time is now 5:32 p.m., and this meeting is hereby called to order. We have the presence of quorum attending in person. Notice of this meeting has been posted online and at the Fort Bend ISD Administration Building for at least 72 hours. So I would like to turn this over to Dr. Wayback for presentation. Thank you.
Yes, this hearing is required by law and will be led by our Chief Financial Officer, Brian Gwynn.
Good evening, members of the board and Dr. Whitbeck. This evening, we are conducting a public hearing on the proposed tax rate for the district in accordance with state statute. The district is required to adhere to truth in taxation requirements when adopting the tax rate. These include adopting the budgets for the general and debt service funds, receiving the certified tax roll from the chief appraiser, having TEA certify the maximum compressed rate, and advertising the proposed tax rate in a local paper at least 10 days prior to the public hearing. The district has met all these requirements as required by statute and now must conduct the public hearing on the tax rate to finalize the process. The adopted budget for the general fund totals $766.56 million and requires a tax rate of 94.92 cents. This tax rate results in a balanced budget with a surplus of $1.4 million. However, the budget does not include raises for teachers or staff. The adopted budget for the debt service fund totals $134.68 million and requires a tax rate of 27 cents to support. The debt service fund includes payments on outstanding principal and interest for the district's debt. Although the Fort Bend ISD adopted budget did not include raises, many of our peer districts did adopt raises for teachers and staff. Cy-Fair, Katy, and Lamar all adopted 3% increases for teachers and all other staff. And the result of those raises across the region has left the starting teacher pay in Fort Bend ISD of $59,500, lower than any other large district in the region. We are at the bottom of the list. The lower staff compensation has resulted in the district having vacancies in key positions such as teachers, bus drivers, police officers, classroom aides, and speech pathologists. And in addition to the vacancies that we are facing, we've also been impacted by inflation. This is both for staff who are not receiving raises. Since the last time the basic allotment was increased in 2019, up to the time the 88th legislative session ended, inflation has risen over 14.4%. Fuel is a key area where we have been impacted by inflation. Inflation on diesel fuel has increased by 94%, while unleaded fuel increased by 61%. And although unleaded fuel has come down and normalized, diesel fuel has not and makes up over 72% of our actual fuel consumption. And so this is a key area where inflation has had a negative impact on the district. We're also impacted by higher costs for special education. The district spends in excess of $30 million over what we receive in revenues to provide services to our special education students. And as we're facing these rising costs and inability to give raises, we've looked at our peer districts and analyzed their tax rates. There are currently 8 districts within the region that have all 8 golden pennies that are available through the TRE process, with some of those districts having copper pennies as well. And as we've discussed previously, some of these districts had tax rates in excess of $1.50 back in 2006, and so they didn't actually have to go through the TRE process to receive those additional golden or copper pennies. The district has advertised a tax rate of 99.92 cents, which includes 5 enrichment pennies. And although the rate was advertised at 99.92 cents, the board can opt to adopt a tax rate between 94.92 and 99.92 cents. And you can see the revenue that will be generated when taking between 2 and 5 cents as part of a TRE. If the district adopts a tax rate taking all 5 pennies, 2 of those pennies are golden pennies and will not be subject to recapture. 3 pennies are copper and would be subject to recapture at $500,000 per penny, or $1.5 million total. And the amount has been netted from the dollar amounts I showed you on the previous slide, so that will be the net money that comes into the district after paying recapture. As we look at doing a VATRE, as we've told you previously, this is not a decision to which we came to lightly. Prior to consideration, staff and the board worked over 2 years to reduce the budget by $39 million. That included over 350 positions. And this work is ongoing. We continue to review all non-campus positions before filling them, and we've initiated work on a strategic plan that will guide future expenditure adjustments as we plan for the future. And keying in specifically on some of those reductions that I mentioned, those have impacted central administration. And so over the last 5 years, central administration expenditures have gone from 2.46% of total general fund expenditures to 2.29%. And when we compare ourselves to the statewide average, we're a full percentage point below the statewide average on general administration expenditures. Our current tax rate at $1.1346 is one of the lowest in the region. We're 11 cents lower than Lamar, 16 and 17 cents lower than Cy-Fair and Katy. And even if the district were to go up by 5 cents, our tax rate would still be one of the lowest within the region. This is our tax rate over time, over the last 8 years, and you can see our tax rate has dropped from $1.34 to 94.92 cents. Most of those reductions are a result of the state compression that was enacted into law back in 2018. So if the board moves forward with a VATRE, we would be asking for between 2 and 5 cents, and that would result in a tax rate between 96.92 and 99.92 cents. And again, this is the lowest the tax rate has been over the last, actually it's the lowest it will have ever been in the recorded history that we have. We've presented 4 different options that the board can look at as we go through the process of adopting the tax rate. The 2 to 5 cent VATRE will allow the district to compensate teachers and other employees at a rate that is competitive with our surrounding districts. With a 2 cent increase, we can address starting teacher pay $2,500 to $62,000, police officer pay by $5,742, do a $1 per hour increase for classroom aides, auxiliary staff, non-classroom paraprofessionals, and bus drivers, and a 3% increase for all other staff. With a 3 cent scenario, we can do all the items included in the 2 cent scenario, but we can add armed security personnel to all elementary campuses, add an additional 50 cents per hour to classroom aides and bus driver pay, and add $1.3 million to identify and serve special education students. As we indicated earlier, that's an area where we've had a significant increase in expenditures, but not a proportionate increase in state aid. With a 4 cent increase, we can do all the items included in the 2 cent scenario, add the armed security personnel to all elementary campuses, add an additional 50 cents an hour to the classroom aides and bus driver, and include a differentiated teacher step scale, which I'll show more detail on shortly. And then with a 5 cent increase, we can do all the items included in the 4 cent scenario, and we would be able to add $3 million to identify and serve special education students, another $1.5 million for technology support to add one-to-one technology devices at the secondary level. The district has received a federal grant of over $17 million that would allow us to purchase those devices. And so this would be the administrative supports or technology support staff to provide the services to students with those devices. As we consider the raises, this is a breakdown by category of our staffing. you can see that teachers make up about 54% of our overall staffing in the general fund. And with a 2-cent increase, all of the funding generated by the VATRE would be used for staff compensation. And of that amount, 65% of the total compensation will go to teachers, librarians, counselors, and nurses, and they represent 54% of the total staffing. With a 3-cent increase, we can add $2.5 million for the armed security personnel at the elementary campuses, $1.3 million to help identify and serve special education students, and an additional 50 cents per hour for classroom aides and bus drivers. And you can see what that allocation looks like here. As we move into the 4 and 5 cent scenarios, one of the key aspects of both of these options is the addition of a differentiated teacher step scale. Currently, teachers receive $500 as an increase as they move up the teacher scale based on their years of experience. The exception is at the 5-year mark where those teachers receive a $1,000 increase as a point of differentiation. This differentiated scale would add an additional adjustment at each 5-year milestone, increasing by $250 at each 5-year marker starting at year 10. And so teachers at year 5 would continue to receive the $1,000 bump as they currently do. Teachers at year 10 would receive a $1,250 bump instead of the current $500. Teachers at year 15, a $1,500 bump instead of $500, and so on. And so you can see how as that scale goes up, it increases at those 5-year increments. The net impact of this implementation is that in year 1, if this were implemented, teachers with between 1 and 10 years of experience would receive $2,500. Those with experience between 11 and 15 years would receive $3,250. With experience between 16 and 20 years, $4,250, 21 to 25 years, $5,500, and year 26 and above, $7,000. And so this is where the brunt of the expenditures would occur, is elevating those teachers in those steps up the additional pay scale. And so as you look at this, you can see that only Cy-Fair has a similar program, and it only comes into effect in year 20. And so this truly sets us apart from our peer districts and allows us to better manage years when we're either unable to do raises or to do raises that are not in alignment with what other districts are doing. So it's something that will set Fort Bend ISD apart from our competing and peer districts. The 4-cent scenario allows us to implement that differentiated teacher step pay scale and add the additional 50 cents an hour for classroom aides and bus drivers, as well as have the armed security personnel at all elementary campuses. And so the difference between the 4 and 5 cents is that with the 5-cent option, we can do everything that you just saw in the 4-cent scenario, but we are able to add an additional $3 million to identify and provide services to our special ed students, as well as the support staff to support one-to-one technology devices at the secondary level, with the devices being purchased with a $17 million grant. Later this evening, the board will vote on the tax rate, and the board can again vote on a tax rate between 94.92 cents and 99.92 cents. A tax rate of 94.92 cents does not require an election and supports the adopted budget that has already been adopted by the board, but does not include raises. That rate will result in the tax bill for the average homeowner going down by $1,149. A tax rate of 96.92 cents will add 2 additional pennies and requires a VATRE, and that rate reduces the tax bill savings over the 94.92 cents by $54 or about $5 per month. A tax rate of 97.92 cents will add 3 additional pennies and requires a VATRE, and that tax rate will reduce the savings over the 94.92 cent rate by $81 or about $7 per month. A tax rate of 98.92 cents will add 4 additional pennies and requires a VATRE, and that rate reduces the savings over the 94.92 cent rate by $108 or about $9 a month. And then finally, the highest tax rate that the board can consider is 99.92 cents. That adds 5 additional pennies and requires a VATRE, and that rate reduces the savings over the 94.92 cents by $135 or $11.25 per month. And with any rate that is adopted between the 94.92 and 99.92 cents, the average taxpayer will see a reduction in their tax bill of over $1,000. And the final thing that is not on this slide that's also important to emphasize, anyone who is over 65 or has a disability exemption on their homestead will not be impacted by the VATRE. Everyone will see their tax bills go down, and so they will not be impacted by this change. So the purpose of this meeting is to hear from the public on the proposed tax rate, with the actual vote on the tax rate occurring at the regular board meeting later this evening. And so, Madam President, I'll turn it back over to you to conduct the public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Guan. So at this time, I would like to invite anyone, any member of the public to speak if they would like to do so. This is really just about the tax rate hearing. If you sign up for the regular business meeting, you need to wait for we start the regular business meeting. But anybody wants to speak about tax rate, please, you can just raise your hand and start talking. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. So I just need to read this. The board encourage and welcome comments and input from our patrons. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. And please refrain from mentioning a student or employee's name when voicing a concern or complaint, as board policy provides alternative procedures through the grievance process policies, GF local or DGBA local, to seek resolution to complaint. So each speaker have 3 minutes to make your comments. Once the speaker starts the comments, the board secretary, Mr. David Hamilton, will announce when they have 30 seconds remaining. Once the 3 minutes time limit has expired and whether the speaker has concluded their comments, David Hamilton will announce that the speaker's time has elapsed. So, Madam, please start.
Thank you, board, for allowing me to speak. Good evening. My name is Susan Ridley, and I've lived in Sugar Land for 32 years. So I just want to say thank you for this, putting on the website all of these slides. It was very informative. I have to say I'm probably one of the few for the increase. But I have a question about the number of the directors. Now, I'm not sure what a director is, but I was just kind of concerned that there were 66 and above directors. So I see that y'all have 260 principals and assistant vice or assistant principals. So I wasn't sure why y'all needed 66 directors. And then the other question is I'm glad the teachers are getting raises. How is this going to be funded in the future? So you're going to have this big increase in payroll from now on out. The teachers deserve it, yes. So I'm just curious as to how that's going to be adjusted in the future. There's going to be another increase. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for coming tonight, and I will have, I'm going to need to consult our legal counsel. Can we answer the question right now?
Rather than answering the direct question right now, I'd recommend after the public comment, if the board or the administration is able to answer the question, they can do that during the course of discussion.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam. We'll have the question answered tonight during the discussion. Thank you. Is there anyone in the audience who are willing to speak at this time? Seeing none, I'm going to open the floor for a quick question for 10 minutes. I do intend to adjourn this meeting at 6 because we have students waiting outside for recognition. So if the board have questions, for the next 10 minutes, we'll have the discussion. But when it's come to 6 o'clock, I'm going to adjourn the meeting and we'll continue the discussion during the regular business meeting. Thank you. Mr. Garcia.
Thank you, Madam President. I just had one question I noticed, and I don't know if it was an error, but the presentation last week had bus drivers shortage at a 40%, and then I look at it here, I think it's a 25%.
Yes, sir, you are correct. However, when we received information back as HR evaluated that number, that included vacancies that Gold Star is currently covering. And so when we factor out the routes that Gold Star is covering and look just at vacancies where we have route vacancies, it comes closer to that 20% that you're seeing on the slide now. So I apologize for not calling that out during the presentation, but we have adjusted that number to reflect routes covered by Gold Star.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Garcia. Thank you, Ms. Garcia. Ms. Hannan?
My question is really just for the public, and I would also like, if Ms. Ridley's question, how is this going to be funded in the future? Because I think that's important for people listening to understand that this tax rate, if we choose 2 through 5 cents, those funds continue to come to us. But my specific question is on the slide that shows the tax bill impact. I'm going to ask if you could explain that in another way. You used the term reducing the savings. Can you just explain what, I understand what that means, but I wonder if folks listening who haven't been looking at this really understands what you're saying by reducing the savings.
Yes, ma'am. So I'll start with the first question is, if this is approved, how will the ongoing costs be maintained? And so this would be a permanent increase to the tax rate of 5 cents. And so that will allow us to continue to collect that revenue over successive years. And so that will ensure that the funding for the raises that we are implementing today can be sustained over the long run. The second question on the tax bill impact. And so the tax bill that supports our budget with no need for a VATRE is 94.92 cents, and that will result in a tax bill for a resident who has an average home valued at about $370,000, which is the average within the district, of $2,569. And so with this tax bill, that represents a $1,149 reduction from what the taxes that they would have paid with the old tax rate that was in effect. And so as we increase the tax rate with a VATRE, so this is where it becomes fun, the tax rate is going down, and it will be less than it was last year. So if we increase the tax rate above the 94.92 cents, which is where it will be statutorily required or statutorily defined, to 96.92 cents, that will reduce the savings of $1,149 to $1,095. And so it's taking that savings that they had and reducing it by $54. And so they would pay, and when I say pay, the savings that they are accumulating is about $5 less than what they would have otherwise received. And that progresses through each of these scenarios.
And is that due to the homestead exemption, that savings, because your taxable value has decreased?
It's a combination of two factors. One, yes, ma'am, it is an effect because of the $100,000 increase to the homestead exemption, but our tax rate is also being compressed. We're currently at $1.1346, and we're being compressed down to 94.92 cents. So it's a combination. The savings is a combination of increasing the homestead exemption as well as compressing the tax rate.
Okay.
And so the TRE will compress the tax rate a little less than what it would have been if voters approve the VATRE.
Okay, but they're still coming out with savings.
They're coming
Right.
out with over one.
Regardless.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Regardless of what scenario is ultimately enacted by the board, they will have over $1,000 in savings
Okay.
on their tax bill.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gwynn.
And Madam President, if you don't mind, I just want to interject one thing. Brian did a great job going through the slides, but one of the points that got missed, that just kind of got buried there, is that this would, any of those scenarios would increase state funding by $14 million a year. So if we do not do a TRE, we'd be leaving $14 million a year on the table. So.
Thank you, Ms. Hannan. Thank you, Mr. Bassett and Mr. Guan. And Dr. Wayback?
Yes, thank you for the question about directors. And as you notice, we have like over 250 assistant principals and principals. That's because of the 80 campuses, 80,000 students. And so proportionately, directors lead various divisions. So I just, off the top of my head, wrote down a few. And so especially, remember, as large as we are, directors in technology, special education, transportation, curriculum, finance, maintenance, fine arts, athletics, human resources, food services, and on. So when you add it all up, that's 66.
Thank you, Dr. Rayback. Mr. Hamilton.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Mr. Nguyen, for that presentation. I think our page numbers are different, but early in the presentation, the slide that says adopted budgets. I think if somebody criticized either the board or the district for that statement, that the budget does not include teacher or staff raises, I think we would have a big objection to that because we did do something for our teachers and staff in the budget. And so I think it's not super helpful to leave that out. So we did the STEP and the recruitment and retention bonus. So even though that's not an annual recurring thing, those are both one-time boosts, but I think they're worth including in the equation. So then if you flip to the next page, so this the data point's a little bit dated just because it's the last publicly available information. But I sent the average teacher pay for our district and Lamar CISD and Katy ISD to the administration, I guess last week. And so our teacher pay is currently, or as of that, the last TAPRE for each district, for each district, our teacher pay is higher than Lamar and Katy. And then if you do consider, if you added our STEP and our recruitment retention bonus to this slide, then for this year at least, it would be a $2,000 bump for Fort Bend ISD. So we were higher as of that date, and we've actually did more, just limited to 1 year, we did more than those three districts did for teachers within the budget. So I just think it's helpful to point that out. And then one other, so on the enrichment pennies page, so we typically have Lamar on pretty much everything we compare, but they're not on this chart. Do we know off the top of our head where they're at on golden pennies?
Yes, sir, we do. So Lamar currently has 5 golden pennies. Part of the reason that they don't have more than that is they do have, and they've been named on multiple years, the fastest growing district in the state. And so part of that student growth allows them to do more with compensation because of their student growth. Right. I do want to go back briefly on the taper information. You are correct. When you look at where Fort Bend ISD falls on average teacher pay, we are higher than our peers. However, keep in mind, that is based on the years of experience of the teachers that we have that are currently employed. And so if we were pulling teachers from other districts that are at higher levels of experience, that's part of what skews that number more to our benefit. But for a teacher that is starting this district, fresh out of college, they will make $3,000 less than Katy or Lamar. And so our recruitment becomes very difficult when they are looking across the region and you have mobility that can get you quickly to those districts. It becomes much harder for us because we are so much lower for a teacher that is coming into the district with no years of experience.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. Thank you, Ms. Nguyen. Ms. Hannan, do you have a
Well,
question?
I want to be clear. So the one-time incentive that was given this year, without, if we remain at the tax rate that we're at currently, and it does not go to a vote, that could not happen next year.
Yes, ma'am. That is a one-time payment from this year only. And as a matter of fact, we are paying those retention and recruitment supplements from ESSER funding, which expires at the end of the current school year.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hannan. I have I don't see anybody else, but I have a real quick question just to clarify. For the starting salary, you said ours is lower than our neighbor district, right? So when we say that, you also said it's like 3,000 or 2,500 lower?
So we are $3,000 lower than Katy and Cy-Fair. I'm sorry, $2,900 less than Katy, and we would be even with Cy-Fair.
So, but that number did not include the 1,500, just one time. Did we pay the new teacher? I just trying to figure out that 1,500, did we pay our new teachers or no?
Yes, we did. However, many of these districts, and I can go back and confirm for you, also paid retention and recruitment supplements as well, some of them in excess of what we did.
Okay.
So we were not alone on an island with recruitment and retention supplements.
Got it. Thank you for that. I just want to clarify. So I don't see any other questions for now, so I can have a motion to adjourn this meeting so we can start the next.
I move to adjourn.
Thank you, Ms. Garcia. So the time right now is 6:02, and we are now adjourned.